Welcome to another episode of Wiser Hero. Today we will be reacting to a video made by Gregg Braden entitled, Learn This and You Can Predict Future Events in Your Life. About 7 minutes into Gregg's video, he started to show a timeline starting on the left, which would later be revealed to be from 1914 and ending in 2016. The deviation was depicted by a vortex which was large in diameter in 1914. As the vortex spiraled its way to the year 2016, its diameter decreased, yet not all the way to an intersecting point. For our reaction purposes, we flipped the timeline so that the 1914 was on the left side while the 2016 ended up on the right side. As you may have noticed, Gregg's timeline had a total of 10 loops. Finally, at about 19 minutes into Gregg's video, he revealed the years on his timeline. The years were 1914, 1973, 1997, 2006, 2009, 2011, 2012, and 2016. The last two loops did not have years associated with them. The other 8 loops were spaced out by differing amounts of years due to the use of fractal math. In case you didn't know, Gregg Braden is a senior computer systems designer with a background in life sciences. In his video, he wanted to show how pattern recognition from life sciences could be used to find patterns in computer data. In his video, he wanted to show how he wrote an algorithm that is able to predict conditions when an event might repeat. For example, he believed that if he seeded his algorithm with a surprise attack date of December 7, 1941, the program would predict the date of September 11, 2001. The first date that his program predicted was 1984. The second date the program predicted was March 2001. March 2001 was 6 months before September, yet apparently the planning for the attack was being created in consciousness, so it was considered accurate. The date in 1984 was accurate because Russia was planning a secret attack on America for that year. The conditions for an attack were present in 1984, yet the attack did not happen. Gregg explained that the end of 2012 was the end of a Mayan calendar period consisting of 5,125 years. Also, that 2016 was a choice point. Gregg explains that choice points are points found in between the end of one cycle and the beginning of another cycle. At those choice points, humanity could choose to continue all the bad things or could choose peace on earth. Gregg explained that 2016 was the end of a 36-year buffer zone that began in 1980. He also stated that it wasn't too late to choose world peace. All respect to Gregg, yet with only 4 minutes left in his 24-minute video, the whole thing started to sound extremely political. Gregg stated, "You can see that the time between each of these dates is getting closer and closer and closer together." This is not entirely true as you get to the space between 2012 and 2016, where the space increases by 4 times the previous contraction. Gregg continued to say, 2016 was the opportunity for all the previous cycles, specifically frightening things, to reoccur. Gregg wrapped up the last minute of his video by stating that even though the 36-year buffer period ended in 2016, it's still not too late to stop frightening things from happening again. Let us quickly run away from the political spin of Gregg's video because the pattern recognition is more interesting. To calculate the upper end of the vortex spirals, we halved all the years and ended up with 29.5, 12, 4.5, 1.5, 1, and 0.5 years. At that rate, you are probably already asking why Gregg's vortex doesn't come to a point. The answer is that it should have come to a point at the end of 2012, and the only reason that it did not was that would defeat the political spin of Gregg's chart. By adding the half years, we were able to see that the upper end of the spirals were at 1943.5, 1985, 2001.5, 2007.5, 2010, and 2011.5. The 1943.5 year was about 1.5 years off. The 1985 year was about 1 year off. The 2001.5 year was about 0.5 years off. Although they were off, you can see the pattern there as well, being off in decreasingly 0.5 year increments. Next, we readjusted the chart to intersect at a point for the date at the end of 2012, beginning of 2013. Then we readjusted so that we didn't start with a 0.5 year. Starting again with the 2012-2013 intersect point, we were able to figure that the 6 loops would be represented by the years 2014, 2016, 2019, 2028, 2052, and 2111. By erasing the last 4 loops of Gregg's chart, we were able to reconstruct as if 2012-2013 was the intersecting point. Then we added nodes to all of the years on the chart until there were a total of 15. In this way, we were able to show that the 2012-2013 node could be represented as the musical note of C. If you were like us, you wanted to see when the cycles might change their diameters. If you know Gregg's algorithm, you could figure out the next octave of C in the future after 2111. Likewise, you could figure out the last octave of C in the past before 1914. Now, let's look at the ancient pattern of 70-year cycles as they relate to Gregg's chart. You can see that from 1941 to 2001 is 60 years. Also, from 2001 to 2008 is 6 years. And from 2008 to 2012 is 4 years. That is a total of 70 years. This can be forward engineered to see the same pattern from 2012 to 2016 is 4 years. Then, from 2016 to 2022 is 6 years. Finally, from 2022 to 2082 is 60 years. The total again is 70 years. Revisiting for a moment Gregg's buffer of 36 years, it would seem that if it ended in 2012, then it must have started in 1977 instead of 1980. Also, it would seem that there's no need to panic since the traditional buffer probably follows a 72-year period that ends in 2049. Since 1976 and 2048 are extremely important dates in American history, a 6-month correction to that buffer period is probably in order. The number 72 is an important number in the Universal Commercial Code and is related to contracts. If Gregg's buffer is a time to review and renew contracts, then there seems to be at least 29 years left for humanity to decide if we like the way things are or if we want peace on Earth instead. Checking the math on the dates of 1977 and 2049 shows that they are spot on within 0.5 years. Moving on, let's take a look at Gregg's math on the 5,125 year cycles of the Mayan calendar. Although 5,125 years times 5 cycles doesn't add up to 26,000 years, it is close enough. Let's look at why that is. Ancient texts and current scientists agree that the time frame could be anywhere between 24,000 and 26,000 years, with some thinking shorter or longer than those numbers. One such ancient chart shows a cycle of 24,000 years where each section is called a yuga. It is said that our solar system is orbiting a binary star and that our current location would be similar to that of autumn on a yearly calendar. Conversely, our position in this 24,000 year cycle is likened to feeling more like February after a 2,400 year winter of darkness where everyone was dumb as rocks. And on this journey toward enlightenment, it will only take another 10,500 years for humanity to become the best they could ever be before beginning another 12,000 year descent into darkness. Similarly, the Earth orbits the Sun, with January being the darkest month while July is the brightest. In a yearly cycle, we might expect to invest during winter, plant during spring, cultivate during summer, and harvest during autumn. However, there is a significant difference between autumn and fall. The answer to the question in autumn and August is found in the definitions of those two words, for they mean to ask, can I afford to do it again? If the answer is no, then you will certainly have a season of fall as opposed to a season of autumn. Brilliantly, we find ourselves at the autumn juncture of our 24,000 or 26,000 year cycle. It is the autumn in the 6th yuga. Can we afford to do it again? For some it will be an autumn, for others it will be a fall. This is the ultimate choice point. You might ask, in the scheme of a yuga, I'm not going to be around that much longer, so do you have anything that applies to me? Absolutely. That takes us to our next diagram of the new moon and full moon. It takes 354 hours for the moon to cycle from new to full, and another 354 hours to empty itself. Many of you know about the moon's effects on behavior. That 72-hour period before the new moon and that 72-hour period before the full moon, they make everyone go crazy. Let me quickly interject the point that if you divide the 25,625 years of the Mayan calendar into 70-year segments, you will end up with 366 segments. Considering that the length of days changes over the 6,000 years, you will see that every day on our calendar year is like 70 years on the Mayan calendar. Now let's get back to the personal size of time. If we turn the moon cycle diagram clockwise and draw a person's torso over it, we can see something interesting. The path and cycle of the cerebral spinal fluid follows that of the moon cycle. The fluid is secreted and heads south to the age of 12 days. Then it spends 3 days at the base of the spine before heading back up through the nerves back to the brain. 12 days later, the fluid remains 3 days in the cerebellum before entering the pineal gland. So if you had been wondering why so many people act crazy during those times, now you have some clues. You could liken these 72-hour time periods as having an autumn choice point twice a month. These times are the best times to stay away from anything that you feel brings you down. These twice-a-month choice points are similar to the twice-a-day choice points that Gregg describes as dawn and dusk prayer times. These in-between times are where Walt Disney pulled magic out of his hat. In any case, you have 2 great opportunities every month with the new moon and full moon, and 2 great opportunities every day with dawn and dusk. In the end, every nanosecond is a great opportunity for you to choose your next choice. Next, let's take a deeper look at the 70-year cycle and how it has shown up in history. We are going to start at the year 1868, yet let's take a look at a few 7-year cycles before that time. 1777, loss of French investments after the war. 1784, financial panic. 1791, financial panic. 1798, financial panic. 1812, War of 1812. 1819, U.S. bank failures. 1847, post-railway panic. 1868, gold crisis. 1873, long depression. 1882, railway depression. 1889, Samoa crisis. 1896, U.S. bankruptcy panic. 1903, Venezuela crisis. 1910, panic depression. 1917, U.S. enters World War I. 1924, U.S. recession. 1931, second year of 10-year depression. 1938, recession. 1945, post-war recession. 1952, post-war recession. 1959, credit interest recession. 1966, credit crunch. 1973, oil crisis. 1980, interest inflation recession. 1987, Black Monday interest recession. 1994, NAFTA, jobs lost to Mexico. 2001, dot-com bust. 2008, real estate recession. 2015, the Great China Fall. Next. Yet, even through it all, humanity has increased its physical comfort level as a whole. That would be percentage-wise or per capita-wise. Next up, let's take a look at the generational theory of 80-year cycles. Each cycle is divided into 4 turns of 20 years each. The 4th turn of each cycle is said to be the crisis turn, when society experiences wars and financial crisis. During these times, the generations born are called artists. The crisis years marking the beginning of the last 8 artist generations are 1433, 1461, 1566, 1674, 1767, 1843, 1925, and 2005. Although generational theory pertains to America, the earlier years of 1433 and 1461 show the seeds of history that would influence what America would become. In 1433, the English retreated from France. In 1461, Edward of York won the War of Roses. In 1566, the first European birth was recorded in St. Augustine, Florida. It is not lost on this topic that the name of the town contained the word August, a choice point. That same year, in 1566, the town of St. Augustine was burned to the ground by the indigenous peoples. The whole town relocated and rebuilt instead of giving up. In 1674, English common law was enacted. In 1767, the Stamp Act was enacted. In 1843, a railroad bubble created depression. In 1925, the beginnings of the Great Depression began. In 2005, the beginnings of the Great Recession began. The current artist generation will end in 2025, which should usher in 60 years of relative prosperity, not to ignore a steady stream of never-ending 7-year crisis cycles. In the end, these cycles are evident in my own life. In 2017, I became aware of cycles in my own life that lasted for 7 years each. I was born in 1966 during what was called the credit crunch. Since I was born on an existing 7-year cycle, it wasn't surprising to see that the ups and downs of my life corresponded directly to the ups and downs of America. Like a page out of an ancient text, I have experienced 7 years of feast followed by 7 years of famine on a regular basis. Interestingly, I have made the most amount of money 2 years prior to entering into each of my feast cycles. Conversely, something bad had happened 2 years prior to entering each of my famine cycles. The cool thing you may have noticed is that this year of 2020 is 2 years prior to my next 7-year feast cycle. The question is this: now that I know my 7 years cycles, will I still be able to make the most money ever this year? And will I be able to break the cycle of famine when something bad tries to happen in 7 years from now? Or will I be able to have unlimited feast years from now on? Over the past 3 years, I have been able to identify 108 patterns in my life of 54 years. A fun fact is that while making this video, I discovered another pattern. In 1978, I had significant dealings with a newspaper and with a school principal named Mr. Brown, who was also a teacher. Then, 22 years later, I had significant dealings with a newspaper and with a school principal named Mr. Brown, who was also a teacher. These two Mr. Browns were two different people in two different states, and the newspapers were also two different newspapers. So now I ask this question: in 2022, which is 22 years later, will I meet a third Mr. Brown in a third state who is a principal and a teacher and have dealings with a third newspaper? Stay tuned to find out. Again, I thank Gregg Braden for posting his video, and I hope that my reaction and perspective was helpful to someone out there. It certainly was helpful to myself. If you would like to explore more about your personal or global patterns, please feel free to text me at the phone number in the description. Thank you for watching, and consider watching our other videos on this Wiser Hero channel.